2025 has been a massive year for U.S. President Donald Trump.
Live proudly, we will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun.
Since his inauguration in January, Donald Trump has reshaped how presidents engage with issues both within and outside of the United States. For more on how year one of Trump's second term has taken shape, we are joined from Washington by CTV News political analyst Eric Ham. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
There's so much to get to. So before we dive into the issues, what stands out to you the most about Donald Trump's second term so far?
Well, just how chaotic and upending it has been. And of course, many of those checks and balances that have been a hallmark of American democracy, they are going away and going away pretty rapidly, which is why I think Donald Trump's approval rating right now is the lowest it's been for any U.S. president in history.
Okay, so let's dive into some of the issues. So let's begin with the U.S. president's immigration crackdown. We know since January, the Trump administration launched ICE raids right across the country. He's also used the Alien Enemies Act to deport immigrants without due process. Where could Donald Trump take his immigration agenda next?
Well, we've already seen the president move much of federal and national guards into cities across the country, things and moves that many would not have dreamed possible, where you have such a militarization on U.S. city streets of its own military. And I think we could actually see an expansion of that heading into 2026. Already, we're seeing a much more aggressive stance by the administration on immigration, particularly in light of the latest mass shooting that took place at Brown University, as well as the shooting that took place here right before the Thanksgiving holiday that was only steps away from the White House. And so I think what we're seeing now from President Donald Trump is, while even much of his base is beginning to push back on the aggressive ICE efforts, still what we're seeing here is the president and his administration is moving full speed ahead with even more, not less, detentions. In fact, Stephen Miller, the deputy White House chief of staff, says that they need to be pushing those deportations to more than 3,000 a day. And right now, we know that they're struggling with actually doing 1,000 deportations a day.
So we'll be watching that, and we continue to. I also want to ask you about this, because while campaigning for president, Donald Trump committed to releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files. In 2025, this year, Donald Trump went from calling the Epstein files a Democratic, quote, hoax, to signing a bill forcing the release of the files into law. And just this morning, more files have been released that include how many times Donald Trump was listed as a passenger on Epstein's private jet. That was between 93 and 96. How damaging has the Epstein controversy been to the U.S. president?
Yeah, and even with the president signing that law, we know that he actually had to get there kicking and screaming. It was actually a rare rebuke by congressional lawmakers, Republican lawmakers in both the House and Senate, that actually decided to move forward with passing this legislation, even after Donald Trump made clear that he did not support it. And so this is going to be an issue that is going to continue to dog this administration into 2026. And you're right, now that we're getting even more of those explosive documents, which shows how close Donald Trump was, in fact, linked to Jeffrey Epstein, I think it's going to become an issue where the president simply can no longer hide the relationship that he had with Epstein, particularly now that we're seeing many of those young victims who were also involved with President Trump, as well as Jeffrey Epstein, are now also speaking out.
Let's move on to war and peace. Another promise Donald Trump made on the campaign trail was to end the Russia-Ukraine war in, quote, 24 hours. In February, tension between Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky exploded. I mean, who can forget this moment? Let's watch.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country.
It really was a remarkable moment. Then fast forward to August, where President Trump's Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin ended with no real progress toward ending the war. And then heading into the new year, has Trump, in your opinion, brought Ukraine and Russia any closer to peace?
No, and now it looks as though the United States is on the precipice of another war in its own backyard with Venezuela, as we continue to see more oil seizures by the United States and a more aggressive approach with militarization in the Caribbean and Pacific. But as it relates to Ukraine, This has been a situation that has vexed the president because we know that he has actually gone back and forth between attempting to bully and cajole both Putin and Zelensky to actually strike an agreement on peace. But nevertheless, the president simply has not been able to get there. And right now, many believe that it is Vladimir Putin, not Donald Trump, that's actually buying for time as he wants to continue this war. And even President Donald Trump's own White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, has stated that Donald Trump himself believes that Vladimir Putin actually wants a full takeover of Ukraine. And even with that in mind, what we're seeing is a lot of the talking points from the United States, even from the White House, seems as though they're coming directly from the Kremlin itself.
So Donald Trump did broker a peace agreement. We know that between Israel and Hamas in October. At the same time, you mentioned this, the tension with Venezuela this year. I mean, it's escalated. What stands out to you on how he has been positioning himself on the world stage?
You know, it's interesting because, quite frankly, that simply is not an America first or a MAGA mantra or ideology to engage in foreign policy or in international affairs. In fact, we know that one of Donald Trump's most loyal foot soldiers, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's actually leaving Congress at the beginning of 2026, one of the reasons she stated for her displeasure in this break is because of Donald Trump's continued action on the world stage. And of course, Donald Trump has aggressively courted that Nobel Peace Prize, which is why we see him continuing to promote this narrative that he's ended eight wars across the world in just 8 or 9 months.
As the U.S. is about to enter the midterm election year, you mentioned this about polling showing his approval is declining. About 43% of Americans approve of Trump's presidency. You can see that there. So where does that leave Republicans' chances of holding on to the House and the Senate?
Well, if you speak directly to Republicans in both the House and Senate, many of them do not believe that they have a really good chance of actually keeping either chamber, which is why we're seeing so many departures from Congress already. In fact, we know just last week, we know another supporter of Donald Trump's, Elise Stefanik, who was going to be running for governor of New York, announced that she will be leaving Congress at the end of her term, as well as Senator Cynthia Lummis. So we're seeing a record number of people who are walking away from Congress right now. And of course, that has not even begun to take into account the issue of health care, which is becoming a massive, massive problem for Republicans, as 25 million people are expected to lose their health care at the beginning of the year.
So much to talk about. I'm glad we fit it in. Eric Ham, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.